Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of Fighters, Coaches, and Fathers. And I'm excited to have Terrence Chan on the show here today. Terrence Chan will be fighting at Unified for a championship belt on November 16th. Terrence, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good this morning. How are you, Jeff?
Good. Thank you for getting up early. And I know you've got
No
a
worries.
brand new 8-month-old there in the
Yep.
background. So that's awesome that you're getting some time to spend with it. So I really appreciate it. Um, we got about 30 minutes here. And how about the one thing we like to do in these interviews is talk a little bit about your journey into mixed martial arts and
Sure.
into poker, because we can talk about that. But
Okay.
tell me a little bit about how you grew up and your parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty common immigrant story in Vancouver in the 80s. My parents came over from Hong Kong and China in the mid late 70s. Obviously escaping everything that was happening in China at the time. Like so many people came to the West Coast because there were already other Chinese people there and stuff like that. And so they came with not very much. My mom spoke good English. My dad not so much, but they both just worked hard and decided to start a family, and they're kind of classic responsible Chinese immigrant families, and so they're try to get things together, and they lived in a small apartment when I was born, and yeah, they just worked their asses off and tried to give me a better life, and that whole dream of get buy a house, and so I grew up in the suburbs, pretty kind of traditional, child of immigrant upbringing, lucky to be born in this great country, Canada, that and I'm a very proud Canadian, and they definitely sacrificed a lot for me coming from where they did.
And here's another cool thing about Terrence Chan is he's won some poker tournaments, and not only that, but you also developed the CS departments over at Poker Stars and Ultimate Poker. So
That's
talk
right.
about a guy who's really into his hobby, and it's not so much a hobby; you'd almost call it profession. And it is Was there any tension when you talked to your parents about are you going to be a poker player?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know why this is because my family doesn't really gamble at all. But I guess when I was my first year in university at SFU, in Burnaby, I just kind of went to the casino with my cousin, and they were playing blackjack, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I checked out. I think I bought like one of those old CD-ROMs in the used bin for like $1, and I started playing blackjack on it to see if I could get good at it. And then I started playing poker, and yeah, obviously they were not super stoked when their teenage kid would sneak out of. I literally, there were times where I sneaked out the bedroom window and just like stole the car and drove to the casino and played. And at the time I was making like $8 an hour working at the mall. So I would go and I'd gamble and play. And luckily I got good enough at poker that it became a thing, but they still weren't excited. They were really happy actually when I got you mentioned the job at Poker Stars. That was like a legit job. It was kind of weird. It was like a startup in Costa Rica. Um, but it paid a salary. It wasn't like I was just like straight up gambling. Um, so yeah, I mean, you talk about it. It absolutely was a profession. I mean, it was. I ran a customer service department for 3 years at Poker Stars, and then I left that job to become a professional poker player because I just wanted the freedom. I loved the job, but I didn't want to have to show up to work every day and put out fires and stuff like that. My friends were all at that time. A lot of them were also professional poker players. They're traveling the world. It's like it's the Bahamas this week, it's Barcelona next week, and all of these places, all these cool places. I was like, I want to do that too. And so I quit that job to travel the world as a poker player, which I did uh, for about 8 years. It's cool because Ultimate Poker was, for those who don't know, is basically like the sister of the UFC, and that's when I'd started getting into MMA. And so I got to be like a front row at a couple of UFC events for just like the prelims. I mean, I met Dana White, I met Lorenzo Fertitta, I got to see some cool stuff while I was there too. So poker and MMA managed to like blend together for a short period of time.
Wow, that's amazing. But you were into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts
Yeah.
before poker. Well, talk to me about those are always interesting moments. I remember my first moments, my first 30 days. I just got my butt kicked for 30 days by guys that were tinier than me all the time. And it seems like everyone has that story where something just clicks outside of poker and into BJJ. What was that moment like?
Oh, of course. I mean, you talk about getting beat up by guys who are smaller than you. I mean, I think my first jujitsu class, I got like ankle locked by like a girl who was smaller than me. So, I mean, it was like, oh, I guess this works. Yeah, I mean, I've always been kind of like into martial arts. Even when I was working like a regular job, I would just do Muay Thai classes. You know, like most people do. They kind of do like fitness Muay Thai classes, and then you start being like, oh, maybe I could compete. And then but I do think like jujitsu even more so because essentially in like jujitsu you can like spar hard every day, right? Like you wouldn't want to do that in Muay Thai class, you'd get a concussion.
Yeah.
But you know, once you start being like, oh, like every day I'm going hard against people, and oh, now I'm starting to submit people. I was like, I wonder if I could do this, you know, in MMA, whether I could hit someone hard and submit them hard, and you know, you're like, oh, I'm getting to mount, but I can't always finish them. But it's like, oh, but if this was a fight and this was mount, I would just be able to hit them. And then so you know that combined with the fact that I already had a little bit of striking background, I was like, okay, well, let's give this MMA thing a try. And then yeah, I took my first amateur fight, and I thought I honestly like thought maybe I would just do one amateur fight just to see how it was, and I wanted to do that. And I was like, but it was obviously like probably everybody you've ever interviewed on this thing. It's very addictive, and it gets in your blood.
Amazing. And so you move into from amateur into pro, and you got some really cool blogs where you talk about fighting and some of the similarities to poker. But to me a little bit about that. I mean, when I like, there are some secrets to. I play chess, for example.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to compare Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to chess, I would say, well, chess is you got to open up the middle, and then you
Yeah.
got to castle early. Those are two fundamental rules that, if you're a beginner, you use those to make sure that you do in there. If you compare that to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back in the day when I was taking it 100 years ago, you do triple threat guard, right, which is
Yeah.
still sort of there. In poker, are there similarities to MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I think all games sort of have similarity, right? You know, all sort of one-on-one games, and it's always about like move counter move, right? And I think poker, like MMA, is what they call a game of incomplete information, right? Like in chess, all the pieces are on the board. Like you and I have the same information. You know, even if you're black and I'm white, I can see where your pieces are. You can see where mine are. In poker, you don't know, you know a little bit about the other guy, but you don't know exactly everything, right? So, you know, if you're playing Hold'em, you've got all the cards on the board. You know that the most he can have is, say, a flush, but he can have anywhere from a flush to absolutely nothing, right? In MMA, we sort of deal with this situation like, okay, we're on the feet. Is this guy? What's this guy going to do? Is he going to throw his jab? Is he going to throw his overhand right? Is he trying to set up his overhand right by feinting the jab? Is he trying to kick me in the legs? Is he trying to shoot? All of these things kind of you have to process them very, very quickly. In poker, you obviously have a lot more time to think about these things, and in chess you do too, and even in jujitsu. I mean, jujitsu is like kind of in some sense just a slower game than the striking, but all games are the same, right? Like you're trying to outwit your opponent. The primary difference, I think, is how much time you have to think to do it and whether your body actually responds in such a way, right? So you can be, you know, mentally a great MMA fighter, but if you're not in shape, your body physically won't do the thing that you want it to do. On the other hand, you know, if you're in fantastic shape but you're not mentally prepared, then also you kind of fall apart, because even if you're an athletic specimen and you just freeze up in the moment, that doesn't do you any good either. So yeah, like I say, like all games are very similar, I think.
That's interesting. Now, we were talking just before the we started this interview, and you were training at Lions MMA, but
Mhm.
you've recently made a change. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that change and the transition?
Sure. I've always, yeah, Lions was where I had my very first fight that I mentioned. I spent most of my MMA training career there. They've always been very good to me from the very beginning. But I've traveled a lot. like I said, I transitioned into MMA when I was playing poker. When I was playing poker, I traveled a lot. So I've trained on like 5 continents. Um, yeah, and I've like fought in a lot of places with a lot of teams. But Lions was definitely my first kind of proper MMA home because I was spending most of my time in Vancouver. Now I'm at Toshido, out in Kelowna, BC. I live a little outside of Kelowna, and so they're obviously a place that's produced so many UFC fighters, and so many just elite level guys for a city that's got what, like 100,000 people. Like it's smaller than the vast majority of cities in Canada that have produced way fewer fighters. So it's really cool to move to a place. And my partner and I, she and I, we always wanted sort of a house in the woods, a little bit more rural, and we were never going to find that in Vancouver, unless I just picked up $10 million off the street. But even then, you can't find like, an acreage in Vancouver that's like nature. And, you know, you can't see it right now, but I'm looking out my window and I just see forest and woods. And if I opened my window, you wouldn't hear any traffic or any other people. So it's very peaceful. It's a nice environment, and it's still close enough that I can go to Toshido every day.
Yeah, I live right beside Stanley Park, and the interesting thing
Oh,
about that
nice.
is, yeah, it's beautiful here too, and I can see the mountains and Lost Lagoon and that type of thing.
Mhm.
Having said that, I also have to share the park with some people
Yeah.
that sometimes sleep there, so
Yeah, and if
it's a
not,
bit.
there's just tourists running wild and cars zooming wild. Yeah,
Yeah,
for
well,
sure.
that's beautiful. What's the change been working with Coach David Lee at Toshido versus MMA, and is there a difference given the fact that he has such a high level of success out there with
Mhm.
such a limited pool? Well, Michael Hill interviews one of his guys, so we interviewed him last week. He'll be on Friday, and and it's just curious because they used to have this way of training at the beginning, like when they first started out, was you walk in there and you're in a fight. Like there's no, hey, just chill out, relax, and build it. And I
Right.
think they've changed a bit because it's hard on fighters as they get older. But what did you notice when you first started training over there that may have been a bit different and that you liked, or you were like, oh, this is different?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too, from the guys who have been there longer than me. That it was just going in there and it was Fight Club survival. And one of the things I'll say about Coach Dave is that even though, I mean, I don't even know how long he's been in MMA, but it's probably what, like 20 plus years. And he doesn't stop learning. I mean, there's been days where he's come in and be like, oh yeah, I learned this in the back locker room when I was cornering such and such, and I was watching somebody else warm up somebody else. And he's just a guy who, even though he's been in the game a really long time, he's willing to adapt and learn. And I think what you talk about, this sort of um, go in the gym and beat the hell out of each other mentality every single day. Like there's obviously days you need to go hard, but you can't beat each other up every single day. And that's probably one of the things that he learned. I mean, and I guess I'm fortunate that he learned it before I ever showed up at his gym. But yeah, I mean, he just seems to be like a learner of the martial arts, and very much like me. I mean, I'm still an active competitor, but when I'm done competing, I also want to. I love the sport. I didn't get into it for money or glory or fame or anything like that. I love doing it. I love learning about martial arts, and then love learning new techniques and passing them along. And I think Coach Dave's like that too. So I think that's why it's been a good fit so far.
Yeah, it is always interesting to talk to people that are at Toshido because they do have that ultimate respect for David, and they also realize that he is a lifelong learner, and he doesn't keep it a secret. He immediately starts sharing to
Right.
everybody that's fighting. So that's awesome. How did the call come about to get to fight for the championship at Unified?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, I wish I could give you a good story, but yeah. I mean, after I fought at XFFC in late July, and I won a decision, and yeah, I was just like, okay, like let's go. It was a tough camp. Gonna spend some family time, like you mentioned, the baby. Got to take care of some stuff around the house, and then I just get a text, and all it is it's a text from David, said like, you've been offered a title fight for Unified MMA. And I was like, whoa, okay, I guess we're going right back into camp. So I talked it over with my girlfriend, and she was just super supportive. And I just said, like, look, like, we just got out of a camp, like, I can say no, like, it's, and she's like, no, it's too good of an opportunity. It's too perfect. And, I'm really grateful for her to that. And she knows what this would mean to me and what this opportunity means to me. So it means at that time, it was, I guess, 13 weeks of kind of being, again, like, I don't want to be, an absentee dad. Like, I mean, that's the worst thing ever. But at the same time, when you're in fight camp, like, you have to try to be a little bit more selfish and just be like, okay, well, I'm training, like, a lot. And when I'm not training, like, I'm tired and I need to do recovery. So that's tough. So yeah, I mean, I was of two minds. I was, like, super excited, and it also felt really bad that I'd be spending, more time away from home, more time at the gym, which, I'm trying to balance it right now. I guess it's a new challenge.
Yeah, it's amazing that you just talked about that being selfish, and I know that can be a struggle. But Din Thomas and I had a conversation on Sunday. We did an hour-long interview, and I asked him what's it like having Tyrone Woodley and Amanda Nunes, and they're two totally different champions,
Mm,
but both of them are very selfish. And I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? They're probably gonna hate hearing that. And they're like, they just will not be distracted. They'll do everything in order to go, but they are they have to be that way in order to be a championship. You said Tyrone and his OCD, he's just always going and doing stuff. But if you can get a support person, your girlfriend, your wife, whatever,
right.
that can help you understand that. Listen, I got to be selfish. And then I think sometimes that once you get that opportunity to be selfish, and then you can stop being selfish and start to give back, it's almost more rich, the experience after, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I never really thought of it that way. It's a lot more meaningful. I'm gonna take the next 9 weeks or whatever it is to focus on this fight, and then after that, I mean, I said this, I guess, last time too, that I'm definitely gonna to focus more on family. And you're right, it will be more meaningful at that point. But and especially because I am so appreciative that I'm being allowed to chase this dream, and to chase this great opportunity, and that makes me even more grateful.
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, now you're at XFFC with Darren. It's a great organization. Now you're coming to Unified to fight there. If you get a belt, it'll be tough for you to take too much time off
Yeah,
at
everybody
Unified.
hunts for you
Yeah,
when you've got a belt, for sure.
exactly. You'll start getting all the social media call outs of people you don't even know all around the continents you've been. But before we get going, I really appreciate you taking the time, Terrence. One of the things I like to ask questions, and as your family brought you up and this, and now that you're dad, talk to me a little bit about, one of the greatest lessons that you learned from your family.
Yeah, like I said right off the top, my parents came here to give themselves a better life, but also to give me a better life, before I was born. And even taking one generation back, it was my grandparents on both my mom and my dad's side that had it even tougher. Because, so example, in my dad's case, my dad grew up in China, under sort of just after the communist revolution sort of thing, and they lost everything during that revolution. And so my grandparents on my dad's side sent him and his brothers and sisters off to Hong Kong, which was a British colony at the time, in order to have a little bit of freedom, so that they could go to other countries, Australia, Canada, so on, and not be victims. But I mean, I think about having a child now and thinking about how hard that would be to send your own kid away, but to know that it's the best thing for them, to give them a better life. So I mean, that's a tremendous life lesson right there. Is you don't do what's easy for you, you do what's best for your kid. And that's the ultimate family lesson, is that I'm almost getting emotional thinking about it right now. But I think about my baby, and if we have more kids, even how like you have to make those choices, and they're not always easy choices. And I haven't been confronted with them yet because my baby's only 8 months old. We don't even really have that, when you're 8 months old, she runs around, she poops, she eats. There's not that many choices. The choices are we going to feed her peaches, or are we going to feed her broccoli? Like, those are the choices. Like, there's no real super important decisions that need to be made at this point. But yeah, that's going to be hard. Like, one day, what if we have to give everything up for her? Will I be able to pull that trigger and make that decision? And hopefully nothing ever as bad happens as, what happened in China in the 40s and 50s and stuff like that. But you just never know. You can't predict what the future holds. You just have to always think in the best interest of your children.
Wow, what an amazing message, and a great thing to end on, and thank you for sharing that, Terrence. Real quick, if anybody wants to reach out to you, get a hold of you, or train with you, what's the best way for them to do that, or reach out on poker?
Probably Twitter. I used to be on Twitter. I used to be a total Twitter addict all the time and respond instantly to every message. But at T-Chan Poker, I originally started Twitter just to do like poker updates, and now all the poker fans are mad at me because all I tweet about is MMA, and then all the MMA people reading this thinking this guy just plays poker all the time. What do I care about him? But that's probably the best way. I don't use the other social medias too often. But yeah, I mean, hit me up. Just come see the fight in Calgary, and it'll be a great card. Yeah, so buy some tickets, go to Calgary, or I'm not sure if Unified does pay-per-view, but if they do, I always get a lot of pay-per-view because I have traveled so much, and I have a mild level of like fame from poker and stuff like that. So people do watch a lot of my fights from overseas. So I do tend to sell a lot of pay-per-views, but just enjoy the fight. I'm just a guy out here who's doing something he loves. I'm not anybody special. I'm just an example of a guy. Like, if you just show up and you keep working hard, like, you get to do a lot of fun stuff in life. And I think, other than having a baby, nothing's been more fun than doing mixed martial arts. And I just love it. And I just can't wait to fight. I wish it was November 16th today.
Yeah, well, fantastic, Terrence. Thanks for taking the time. Terrence will be fighting Chad Hilliger at the November 16th at Unified for the championship belt. We look forward to seeing you there, and best of luck.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey, guys, subscribe to Fighters, Coaches, and Fathers by clicking the link to your left, and click the box on your right to see the interview with Terrence Chan's opponent at Unified, Chad the Monster Hilliger. Bye for now.